Hello, today is the 8th of December, 2021. Temperatures have been cooling off. However, during the day, the temperatures have been pleasant in the low to high 60s, sometimes up in the 70s and even 80s at times. Yes, even in late November and early December. So things may be changing with the climate. That is my opinion. I'd like to discuss today a topic that I've brought up a few times. I just wanted to analyze these few points that I am going to discuss here. First is violence in general. Second is gun violence, specifically violence with guns. And third, I want to discuss killing with guns. Violence. Is violence, well, to first define violence, violence is basically, to me, to anyone that wants to define it, is pretty much the act of hurting, the act of physically hurting someone that's living, an entity or an organism, a live entity. Of course, violence is necessary in the general sense, because we would not be, I believe, where we are today. Would we be alive if we did not do violence onto other animals, for example? That is a question to be debated. I believe it's debatable. There is a group that believes that humans evolved to be able to survive without having to kill one single animal or eating meat. Many argue that the brain needed this nourishment through meats, that the rapid evolution of humans was due in part to the cooking of meats and the consumption of meats. The rapid movement or migrations of humans was due to this energy packed meal or source of food. However, animals the world over use violence to kill each other and eat each other. Sometimes there are cases where animals kill for other reasons other than eating, such as chimpanzees. They have known to go to something that could be defined as war for territorial gains. Then yes, it could be argued that this is done for the survival of the pack, the group, or whatever. And this is in the animal world. Those that argue that humans are like animals may have a valid argument about the use of violence in general for survival. Those who place humans in a separate category from animals have a valid argument that violence is not necessary, even for survival. And there's a lot of argument there, a lot of gray areas, of course. Like, let's say, for example, humans like eating chicken, or a lot of them do at least. And how can you consume chicken without doing violence to chickens? someone somewhere has to kill the chicken. If you have not done such thing, it is a quite violent and gruesome act that many believe must be done. But of course, we're talking about from humans, violence caused from humans toward an animal for the human's survival, for that person's survival, and ensuring that the legacy or the offspring of that chicken survives as well, because unless that offspring survives, there will be no chicken, and thus there will be no food. Thus the very existence of the human could be at jeopardy. So yes, there's a lot of argument there to be made, back and forth. That's, I believe, why a lot of the confusion comes from. But currently I'm in the camp, where violence is pretty much not needed. I would like to think that that killing chickens for their meat is not violence, even though the act itself may be considered violent. But I don't believe it to be violence. Violence, I define it more like violence for reasons other than your own subsistence and survival. Right? So it may not be necessary to cause violence. I do recognize that. It may not be even necessary to eat any kind of meat. And that's to be debated. That's to be, at least for me, that's still to be found out. Moving on to gun violence, which is pretty much what I wanted to get to. To me, that's absolutely not necessary. Absolutely. Because guns are designed, made, built, concocted, put together, used for one purpose, and that is the killing of other human beings. Obviously, I know not of any cannibals that consume human flesh. And I'm talking about handguns, assault rifles, and such. So there is no need for those, period. Gun violence is just an abomination of man, and it's something that is that it takes a brainwashing, an unbelievable,
in a quarter mile, slight right onto the ramp to Macon.
An unbelievable amount of brainwashing is required to make you think that guns and gun violence is necessary. If you think that's necessary, you're bringing about war, you're bringing about murder, you're bringing about genocide, you're basically agreeing with all of that. You're agreeing with all of the horror brought about by war, brought about by crime, killings, murders, slayings. And that's a whole other subject to touch upon.
Slight right onto the ramp to Macon.
For those that, make it a right
for half a mile.
thing to do, to think about, to make it a right. For those that want to make that a right, that's a whole new conversation to have, and I believe them to be extremely and absolutely erroneous and wrong and immoral and sinful. I mean, everything negative.
I-75 North.
I myself subscribed to that thought process or that camp. Luckily, I no longer do, and I encourage you, highly encourage you, to do the same. And moving on from gun violence, having stated what I believe of it, killing with guns, is it ever necessary? I believe not. Is killing itself or other humans ever necessary? I believe not. Oh, you say, what about murderers, rapists? What about people that kill others, serial killers, whatever? I still believe not. Because you only get one shot at being right. Meaning that you only can try that person as for a capital crime once. And if you get it wrong, you have committed murder. If you get it right, then, I believe you still have committed murder. But let's say you don't. But there's a 50-50 chance if you assume that if you get a serial killer, if you send that person to death because of their crime, because of his or her crime, you stand a 50-50 chance still, even after you found out what happened, you still stand a 50-50 chance of committing murder and condemning yourself through that act. I don't care if you're not the one pulling the trigger. If you're the one supporting such thing, you might as well be the one pulling the trigger. If you're the one pushing for it, if you're the one advocating for it, you might as well be the one pulling the trigger. So, yes, there are a very few amount of countries, I believe, that still believe that punishing people this way, using the death penalty, is correct and moral and the right thing to do. I'm not sure what they base their belief in, but they may be basing their beliefs in erroneous sources. So I believe it to be wrong. I believe it to be the wrong thing to do. And I believe it to be something that will hurt you more than will benefit you. Let's say, just as a mind thought or mind experiment, let's say you are the victim of a heinous crime against a loved one by a serial killer, by a known serial killer, killers caught, and you want to go ahead and get the death penalty. You do not know 100%, with 100% certainty, you can never know whether that person was the one that committed the crime. Even with video evidence, there is still a minute chance that that person did not commit the crime. You must accept this because even though they say cameras don't lie, you never know what video evidence you're looking at. You never know if it's been manipulated, if it's been altered, if it's been swapped. You don't know. If it's been erroneously interpreted, you don't know. with 100% certainty.
Turn left
Yes, you
onto
could
Georgia
be
49 South. Signs for Byron, Fort Valley. Then make a U-turn.
you could be somewhat certain, depending on the circumstances, but
Make a U-turn, then turn left onto the I-75 North ramp.
Te protegerá. Cuando despiertes, te orientará. Pues su mandato es una lámpara y
So just to wrap up this conversation about gun violence, gun killings, I believe it's wrong to kill, period. I believe it's wrong to kill with guns, even more. It is fruitless. It is counterproductive. It doesn't help the situation at all. No matter how grave or how egregious the situation is or was, it doesn't help. If that was the case, the killing would not stop. The killers also have families that would like you dead if you wanted or pushed or got the death penalty for that killer. Especially if they believe the killer is innocent. So what if they got their way as well and they went back and after you got your death penalty, the family of the killer came around and got their wish with you and got you killed, and then your family got back again and got one of their family members killed. I mean, the killing would not stop if this continued, if someone did not say, okay, enough is enough. So where does it end? Who's to say enough is enough? Who should go first? If no one wants to admit that, yes, that's what we deserve, that's what my family or loved one deserved to die. No one deserves to die by the hand of man. That is my belief. That, my friend, I wholeheartedly believe. It is not the business of man to take another man's life. And when I say man, I mean people. Female, male, unconforming, gender, or sex, whatever. So, gun violence it's an absolute unnecessity. Guns are an absolute unnecessity. In my view, violence itself, it is now unnecessary by modern man, modern humans. Even slaughtering animals does not require violence here in the modern world. This is just a reality, one that you must be familiar with unless you've been living under a rock somewhere. Slaughterhouses
in 1,000 feet, slight right.
Use high-tech methods to put animals pretty much to sleep before they're slaughtered, so no violence required there. And this is just for survival, like I said. I don't consider violence when it is done for the survival of others. No man has ever killed another man for his own or her own survival. That is just what I believe. It is because when it has happened, it is because they have gone against all kind of moral and religious and just any kind of regulation, law, any kind of commitment, conviction. That is when that happens, when someone has lost control, when someone has lost it, as they call it, when someone has lost it, that's when murder, killing, slayings happen. And that has always been the case. When someone has lost their control, in a moment of rage, in a moment of hatred, complete and total hatred, in a moment of craziness, insanity, whatever you want to call it, that's when murders and killings happen. And you must agree with this. And that is why I believe it isn't completely unnecessary. Guns are completely unnecessary. They should not exist. They should not be used. They should not be wielded. They should not be had or collected or praised or worshipped or amassed, hoarded. It's just an abomination. It's just a giving your back to all kinds of moral and faithful and religious convictions. It is sad to say or to see and to hear that a lot of people that pretty much worship guns and value and uphold guns higher than even their own family and their loved ones. These people a lot of times call themselves pious. A lot of times they call themselves religious, faithful. A lot of times they call themselves moral and righteous. And they try to layer themselves with all kinds of titles and recognitions and decorations. But in fact, they're just insecure in themselves enough to believe this myth and fantasy. They're looking outside of themselves for protection. They're looking outside of themselves for security. They're looking outside of themselves for their own guilt. This comes from insecurity and fear. And they are the first ones to claim that others are the ones to fear, that have fear, that are unmanly or unmasculine or weak or feeble or meek or whatever, when in fact, if you rely on a machine, on a tool, on a steel appendage outside of yourself, who's the weak and meek and feeble and insecure and fearful? When you really think about it with both sides of your brain, or even half of your brain, even a portion of your brain. It's just beyond logic. It's just beyond, anybody's fathom the way these people think. It is just sad and pathetic the way these people think. Guns are obsolete. No, guns have never been useful. guns have never been used for good. Guns and violence and gun violence have never saved a life, have never brought justice to anyone, have never prevented a crime. That is just a myth. That is just a complete and utter lie and a fabrication. Look at the instances, look at the statistics, and this must be true. A loaded gun is many times more likely to hurt a loved one or hurt the owner than to quote-unquote protect, quote-unquote defend. Man does not need a gun and a weapon to defend. Man has many tools at his or her disposal, apart from a simple tool that could be very well used against him or her. Again, guns are more of a liability than they are a security. More of a ticking time bomb than they are a missile or a cannon. That is just the nature of it. A gun could be robbed from you, forced away from you. A gun could even backfire. There has been cases of guns backfiring on the shooter. I mean, it is just insane and ridiculous the way this is. People have lost fingers, have lost hands, have lost feet, toes, because they've shot themselves with their own guns, like total and utter idiots that they are, just by owning them. I stand guilty of this very crime I am now denouncing, and I feel utterly embarrassed to have to recognize this, but recognize I shall, because I mean, that's the first step to recovery, recognition, right? So I have to put it out there again. I was one of those, and believe me and learn from others. Do not own guns, do not wield guns, do not use guns, and do not promote the use of guns. They will only bring hatred towards you. They will only bring tragedy to you and to loved ones, and they may bring death to you and loved ones more than they may bring death and destructions to your so-called enemies. Thank you very much.